Saurabh Mukherjee joins us, and before I introduce him, I just want to look at the leads, what we're getting from various networks in terms of the electoral votes there. And boy, oh boy, I mean, this is reminding me of 2016 when Aisha and me were anchoring from the studio, not from our homes. It was looking tight, and this is indeed looking very, very tight. What is surprising here is that at a time when the general view, at least with the experts who track the American elections in a much more magnified manner than we do, they were talking about a blue wave, and whether it's a cliffhanger or whether it's a narrow win or whether it's a fight to finish, we don't know. But certainly there is no evidence of any kind of fin wave. Saurabh Mukherjee, good morning. Thank you for joining us. Saurabh, for a change, I may say that you and me are on the same page in terms of analyzing the impact of US elections for India.
Absolutely. I think when you were speaking for the last 5 minutes, I was just music to my ears. I've always believed that the emphasis on politics in the stock market is somewhat overdone, and I completely agree with you. Whichever way this US election goes, we are in good shape in our country. Generally, EM good shape, and the sheer extent of the post-lockdown economic recovery in India will help us override whatever be the outcome there. One thing though, if you do get a democratic sweep across Senate, House, and the presidency, if you do get a democratic sweep, then I think there's a very good chance that the Democrats bring back the big state. They bring back lots of state intervention, lots of state spending. And that in turn could influence how other democracies work, specifically how our country works. So American politics sort of tends to set the trends as to how policymakers in the rest of the world behave. And the Democrats obviously have been itching to get back into power. If they do manage in the next 24 hours to get hold of not just the presidency, but also the Senate and the Congress, and they bring back the big state, that could lead to our country also following a similar path. That has longer-term implications for government intervention in India in, say, areas like infrastructure, areas like healthcare and education. If I had to sort of pick one long-term implication, that's one thing to look out for. Is there a sea change in the way democracies look at politics? Rather than the state moving away, does the state come back in and become far more proactive in the wake of COVID and in the wake of this in the wake of this election in America?
Saurabh, one important aspect which could change the way how manufacturing sector globally would move are trade relations. What Americans do with Chinese and how rest of the world reacts to China, and what kind of what kind of trade war we could be staring at. There was no word called trade war till 2016, and then Trump emphasized on importance of making America independent. What are your thoughts on that? Because that is something which is going to change a lot, and that could change which way the entire wave of manufacturing is going to shift from which country to another country.
So Nikunja, over the last couple of weeks, Mark Mobius and I have looked at the data very carefully as to what's happened since Trump's come. We find no evidence. We find no evidence at all that Trump's China trade war has had a meaningful impact on US trade flows, whether it's merchandise, whether it's services, whether it's flows of capital. In fact, Mark, in my piece, we've sent it to your colleagues in the Economic Times news desk. Hopefully somebody in ET will publish it. This seems to be more political posturing. There is no tangible evidence at all of deglobalization, neither in trade flows nor in capital flows. In fact, in the last 5-6 years, flows from the rich world into emerging markets, capital flows from the rich world into emerging markets have been higher than they were in the 10 years prior to Lehman. So a lot of this rhetoric around protectionism, around beating up foreigners with tariffs seems to be political posturing. On the ground, there seems to be very little impact on flows of money from America to China, FDI from America to China, or indeed trade movement between the two countries. And more generally, even across the broader world, we looked at trade flows between Europe and Asia. We don't see any tangible impact. So I think this echoes the point you were making 10 minutes ago. We tend to overplay the impact of politics on financial markets. We need to understand politicians are more about rhetoric these days than about substance.
Having said that, Saurabh, one cannot be cognizant to factors like what will happen to crude prices and what will happen to dollar index and commodity prices. These are factors which are very variable, hard to predict, but the political regime or the policies of any administration, in this case US administration, will really matter a lot, at least for a country like India, because we are dependent on imports of oil and we also need high commodity prices to give that extra cushion of efficiency and profit to our manufacturing sector.
Sure. No, completely agree with you. And that's why from the middle of March onwards, in fact, I was on your channel that day when the market hit gap down. And I remember I ran off to request my colleagues to consider buying more. From that day onwards, when the market hit gap down, we've been emphatically telling our clients and publishing data to show that whenever the United States goes into recession, in the subsequent 2 to 3 years, India gets an economic recovery, typically driven by two powerful factors. One is a US recession brings down the cost of capital globally by 2 to 3%. We benefit disproportionately. We're already seeing those benefits. There is no way this auto rally would have come through had cheaper money not financed the resurgence in car sales and tractor sales. So the first driver of an Indian recovery post a US recession is cheap money. And the second driver of an Indian recovery post a US recession is oil. When America goes into recession, oil prices fall by 50 to 80%. They've done so this year, and cheap oil is also benefiting our country because the government's fiscal deficit is lesser by 3%. The government is loading up taxes on oil and reducing its fiscal deficit by 3%. Had it not been for that, fiscally, we would have been far worse shape. So if you look back at the last 40 years, you're absolutely right. If you look back at the last 40 years, an American recession is a necessary and sufficient condition for a recovery in our country, because an American recession drives cheap oil and cheap money, and both of those are incredibly beneficial to us. So provided oil prices don't flare up in the next 12 months, we're in good shape in our country. The current paradigm of global liquidity, a 10-year US bond yield close to zero, and cheap oil, it is incredibly powerful for India.
Saurabh, morning. Given the way that we're seeing, U.S. futures react back home, steady, of course, not as much, reason to perhaps get so excited back here. Steady and solid this morning. But we've been talking a lot about the banks. While IT, of course, is coming back today in trade. But from more of a trend point of view, the kind of move that we've seen across some of those banking names in the last few sessions, what are you making of it? Private banks, of course, the leaders in the pack, but even the PSBs, we seem to be seeing a consolidated move on the financials.
So through March, April, we made a call in Marcellus that what COVID will do is COVID will hurt the government's finances, obviously. That in turn will make it very difficult for the fisc to support public sector banks. As I'm sure your viewers know, PSU banks typically run on government giving them money to bridge their tier 1 inadequacy. And we made the call that the government simply won't be able to provide the sort of fiscal support it has historically provided to PSU banks. PSU banks have around 65% share of Indian banking. So the call we made through the early part of the Indian summer was, over the next 10 years, it's a relatively high probability bet that the PSU banks will shed 15 to 20% market share. And on 12th July, we launched a PMS called Kings of Capital, which focuses on investing in those lenders who benefit from the market share shedding that the PSU banks inevitably will have to do. It's very, very difficult to see why PSU banks will not shed 15 to 20% market share. So in our portfolio, we loaded up on banks like HDFC Bank, Kotak Bank, NBFCs like Bajaj Finance. We also have Axis Bank. And over the last couple of months, we've also built a position in AU Bank. Now, my reckoning is the rally in private sector banks is a long way to go. You're benefiting from three separate things. One is obviously the unlock and the recovery in economic activity that we are seeing in the wake of the unlock, some of the strongest PMI data, Tata Steel telling you that their sales are the highest they've ever seen. People like Maruti Suzuki, companies like Maruti Suzuki are also part of our other portfolios reporting good numbers. So the economic recovery. Second is cheap money. I haven't seen this sort of liquidity available at these rates, 4.25, 4.5 for good lenders, cheap liquidity, good economic recovery. And the third is this: the sheer distress, sheer pump down in valuations that we saw through January, February, March. You're getting to buy the best-in-class Indian private sector lenders in a decade where structurally they'll be on the rise. You're getting to buy them at an early part of an economic recovery at very reasonable price to books. It's a mouth-watering opportunity, and hence I was one of the earliest investor in our Kings of Capital portfolio. And I think this whole theme around high-quality financials, high-quality lenders should do well over the next 1 to 3 years.
Okay, so that's clearly on the banks and the kind of trend that we're observing there as well. In terms of the markets as well, Saurabh, I just want to ask you, now you've got these elections out of the way. Domestic factors at the moment, currently post earnings, how are we looking? They've been pretty much in line. In fact, some better than anticipated. And I know you've been optimistic overall as well. But now that we've actually started to see key trends emerge, how's the outlook looking as we head into the second half?
So look, barring a European-style resurgence in COVID in our country, and let's hope we don't get that because our winters are milder. Barring a European-style resurgence in COVID, I think the next 2 to 3 quarters will be incredibly good from an economic perspective. Just simple maths here. All we have seen so far is the unlock driving a recovery in economic activity, right? Broadly, economic activity basis electricity consumption and GST numbers is broadly back to where it was a year ago. But I think the second layer of benefit that we will see over the next 6 months is operating leverage coming through. As we all know, through the first 4 or 5 months of COVID, companies cut cost, right? We all know about, friends, relatives who are at the wrong end of that cost cutting. So these costs that have been taken out through the first 4 or 5 months of this year will lead to a very sharp jump in profits in the last 2 quarters of the current fiscal. So provided the unlock continues, provided the normalization of economic activity continues, I think we will get startlingly good numbers on the profitability front in the quarter ending December and the quarter ending March. I think I can safely say there will be lots of earnings beats there because companies will post surprisingly good operating margins because they have compressed their cost in the wave of the distress which followed through the first 4 or 5 months of COVID. So I think there is more to come on the earnings recovery front. Even if the economy goes broadly back to where we were last year, which is where I think where we have reached, with the same level of economic activity as a year ago, we will see significantly better EPS growth on the back of cost efficiencies that the companies have generated over the last 6 months.
Saurabh, you've been circumspect of investing in Reliance Industries for a while now. What is it that you're making of this relentless sell-off in Reliance the past 2 trading sessions ever since the earnings came out?
So look, as I said, we've never really been following the stock day to day, partly because of the return on capital being lower than cost of capital, the point I think I made in my discussion with you folks, I think a month or so ago. So we've been circumspect because of that. That being said, even I'm a little perplexed as to what suddenly changed in the last, week, 10 days, because yes, results were a little below expectations, but nothing fundamentally has changed to drive this sort of concern. So I'm a little perplexed as to why people, got so bulled up through the summer and why they're suddenly getting worried. It's leadership in the telecom space. It's leadership in Indian retail. If you add up the various parts of Reliance Retail, it is clearly the biggest retailer in our country. Those bits remain intact. So I'm a little bemused here as to, this sort of volatility in a company which is so large and so liquid in the stock market. From our perspective, we've historically kept an eye on it, but stayed away from investing because we haven't quite seen the free cash flow delivery that we like to see in companies before we take stakes in them.
Saurabh, great to have you on the show. Thank you as always for taking the time out and sharing in with us that quick perspective, quick revisit of what the market is up to.